Last night, I dreamt of the ocean, the wind, and this beautiful singing voice. I was on a strange island, yet somehow I felt like I'd already been there before. The night prior, I found myself exploring this dark and mysterious world, left alone to interpret the abstract sights around me. And the night before that, well, where do I even start? I've always had a soft spot for video games that use dreams as a setting, or as a plot element. Their inherent abstract nature allows developers to get really creative with their work. The possibilities are practically endless as long as you can imagine it. The examples I've shown so far are only a few of my favorites, but there are many more games that use dreamlike elements. And despite each sharing a similar concept, their overall themes are quite different from each other. After all, there's no need to follow conventional storytelling, or even logic when you're in a dream. Those dreamlike qualities are exactly what I found in today's game, but before I jump in, I need to talk about the mind behind it. Sodaraptor is the developer behind Pathogen X, one of the demos I covered in my Haunted PS1 video. The game we'll talk about today acts as a loose sequel to one of their previous projects. Hypnagogia was originally created for the 2020 LSD Jam. It's this beautiful exploration game delving into themes like deep dreams, liminal spaces, sleep paralysis, and much more. Your goal is to collect 8 dream crystals spread across various levels. Each of the game's roles were handcrafted using entries from both the developer's dream diary, as well as some users on the LSD Revamp Discord. Despite being heavily inspired by Osamu Sato's LSD Dream emulator, Sodaraptor successfully managed to put their own spin to the genre. The game's vibrant aesthetic and great design attracted many, so it's no surprise that a bit less than a year after, they would release a follow-up in the form of Hypnagogia Boundless Dreams. Booting up the game and this gorgeous startup screen appears. I'm already amazed by the new art direction. I thought the original game looked nice, but this is just wow. It feels like a direct upgrade on what made Hypnagogia unique. But we should probably move on, I'll have plenty of time to gush about the aesthetic later. The opening cutscene sets up the overall plot. Exploration games like these are usually pretty light on story. Most of the time it's left to interpretation, but it's appreciated nonetheless. We see this cute little bunny making its way to a floating crystal. As it gets close to it though, the crystal gets shattered into multiple pieces, scattered in different directions. This huge shadowy creature appears and it cuts to black. We're then left with the remnants of the shattered crystal. Once we have control of our character, we find ourselves in this dark area, serving as a short tutorial. Even though it's very different thematically, it kinda reminds me of Okami's opening sequence when you're in the River of Heavens. I don't know why, but it feels very relaxing. Moving onward, we'll talk to this wireframe bunny who leads us to the game's main hub, the Dream Nexus. Similarly to its original counterpart, Hypnagogia Boundless Dreams' main goal is to collect the remaining dream crystals, well, technically they're fragments, to restore balance to the Dream Nexus. You'll explore a collection of unique worlds, each more impressive than the previous one. There's plenty of NPCs to interact with, some light puzzle solving, some platforming, and even secrets to discover. I don't know how I feel about shouldering the responsibility that is fixing a broken world, but might as well try, right? The first world I got to explore, titled Help a Friend, promptly drops you in the middle of an underground cave. I should probably mention this right now, but each world is titled. Sometimes it makes more sense after clearing the level, but it's a nice addition. Makes it easier to name segments. There's this very familiar bunny up ahead who introduced themselves as Goji. If you've played the original Hypnagogia, you'll surely recognize them as the sorta guide from the previous game. They used to share those really cool developer insights, but I remember them looking a bit less stitched up. Goji disappears as fast as they arrive, so I guess it's best to continue looking around. I love this spin on the cave level. Instead of being your typical dark and gloomy area, it's this mineshaft filled with workers. The color palette is extremely vibrant and it feels like a very solid first stage. I took my time exploring around and it eventually led me to Foreman Fran, who doesn't seem too happy seeing her workers lazing around. She tasks you with retrieving the crystal fragment on this floating platform in the middle of the stage. Even though I don't particularly appreciate being bossed around, this feels more like a 2-bird 1-stone situation. To reach the fragment though, we need the help of a sage, the only person in the mine able to create floating platforms for us. This sends us on a small fetch quest, where we'll meet new NPCs, use a pickaxe to clear a blocked off area, and even go to this really cool minecart ride. Returning to Foreman Fran allows us to snatch a fragment before she can, and collecting it returns us to the Dream Nexus. Hypno, the giant bird I forgot to mention earlier, welcomes you back with what is probably the toughest question ever. How do I feel about other people? Let's go to the next level, yeah? Goji is waiting for you in the next stage, but after a quick chat, they run off again. This world, titled Offering of Water, is just beautiful. It's this bright and colorful water level with a giant whirlpool in the middle. I threw myself in it just to see what would happen. Fortunately, the game's extremely generous with checkpoints. Most video games would usually boot you back to the start of the stage, but here you're treated to a very kind respawn nearby. That way you don't have to redo entire segments of the level. It never felt frustrating, not that I died much, but still, very appreciated. This world follows a similar structure to the previous one. To find the crystal fragment, you have to complete a couple objectives. I really like this approach compared to, let's say, finding the crystal hidden somewhere in the level. It never felt like finding a needle in a haystack. That's mostly relegated to bonus areas, like this small art gallery I found by collecting 4 items across the map. But long story short, my curiosity naturally led me to each objective. The main goal here is to collect water from the pools locked behind those fancy gates. At each pool, there's a seer waiting for you, and what originally felt like the stereotypical scenario of someone testing my worth actually made me feel something. I kinda came in with the idea that this would mostly be a visual showcase, focused on the environment presented, but no, a lot of the NPC dialogue resonated with me. It felt like the author behind it really wanted to spread a message, and that's a really cool addition for the genre. It adds a deeper layer than just exploration, not that there's anything wrong with that. It's definitely in this world that I started getting a real appreciation for Hypnagogia, and even more as I got to the later dreams. But anyway, after collecting this level's dream crystal, I returned to the Dream Nexus and headed for the next world. What awaited me was Rune of Stone, this thick forest of bamboo with a beautiful color palette. The music here is really smooth and complements well the vibe. I'm usually pretty light on the music commentary since I'm not exactly the most well-versed person about it, but Hypnagogia's OST is just fantastic. Each song feels unique and matched perfectly to their associated levels. A lot of talented artists contributed to the soundtrack and it really shows. But anyway, back to exploring. This world eventually opens up to a mushroom village where you learn that a villager got lost not so far from here. I'm usually pretty critical with the amount of backtracking done in video games, but Hypnagogia seems to strike a good balance. Whenever you're asked to go back and interact with a specific item or NPC throughout the level, it never felt like it was purposefully extending the game's length. It took me about 3 hours from start to finish, so the 15 extra seconds I spent talking to this mushroom didn't exactly deter from the experience. Plus, I feel like if I didn't have those interactions with the game's cast, I probably would have had less fun. As much as I liked the level design and I was very excited to see what each world had to offer, I was also really interested in seeing the different character design. And let's just say it, the game has a lot to offer when it comes to both. If you told me prior to this that I'd be flirting with a temple door, I probably wouldn't have believed you. Which, speaking of, the temple segment was really fun. I love the smooth integration of platforming this game has. It was challenging without feeling unfair, and like I mentioned earlier, a slip-up doesn't result in much loss. The treasure at the end of the temple was a crystal fragment, and bringing it back to the village allows us to return to the Dream Nexus. The next world available, Act of Kindness, opens up on this frozen wasteland. I really like how the music starts only when you drop from the top building. I kinda feel bad for the people living here though. They constantly talk about how cold it is and how it wasn't always like that. You can find them huddling around fires in hopes of getting a little bit of warmth. Near the end of the first part of the level, there's this building with two NPCs, one who's strangely transparent, while the other is trying to warm up by the fire. When you talk to this one, they mention how you're the first person to come here in a long time and do they not see the... Oh, another person used to live here, but they don't know what happened to them. Kinda bleak, huh? This ghostly resident asked for our help finding their dog, and it didn't take me long to accept. After retrieving the dog's favorite toy, a new path opens up, and I hope you're not afraid of heights. After some more platforming, you finally reach a dog who not only has the cutest name, but you can also pet them. Extremely important feature, by the way. The act of kindness in this title was probably reunited Biscuit with her owner, and after doing that, you can once again return to the main hub with another crystal fragment in hand. The next dream we get to explore is End of Time, a super cool space area where gravity is lowered. My first couple steps were mostly jumping and adjusting to the floaty controls, but once I got the jetpack, it was on. I really appreciate the new way of traversing the level. Since a lot of the obstacles in here are movement-based, it felt nice to have a reliable way to dodge them. Overall, it was pretty fun, if not a bit more linear than the previous worlds. By technical term, I guess all of them are similarly linear, but they're usually set in more open stages compared to the smaller corridor-based level. Not that there's anything wrong with that, it still has a lot to offer. There's a couple sections I really liked, and I did take some time after to look outside at the space station. For me, the emptiness of space really reinforced the game's dreamlike aspect. Oh, and maybe the Elder God taking the shape of a giant eye. That works too. This segment felt really cool. Kinda took me by surprise actually, especially when I got booted back to this very familiar area. It was a nice change of pace, and the dialogue felt very touching. After collecting the crystal fragment at the end, you're presented with a short cinematic following the bunny from the intro cutscene, but this time, you get to play as them in their very own world. I really like the aesthetic here, and the platforming felt a little bit more challenging. I like it. Near the end of the stage, you're presented with an ominous statue, a monument to all the things you no longer wish to dream of, the thing which can transform into nightmares. In retrospect, I guess it makes sense for a game whose central topic is dreams to also explore nightmares. It's probably a good time to do a spoiler warning too. If you have any interest in Hypnagogia Boundless Dreams, you should probably go play it, or at least watch a playthrough before watching the rest of this video. The next few levels are quite different than the previous one, and I'd prefer not to spoil it for anyone. Regardless, thank you for making it this far. For those of you who are still here though, we see the intro bunny getting captured in a crystal, and then we're back to the Dream Nexus where we'll head to the next world. The tonal shift from this point forward is pretty wild. I wasn't expecting it at all. Meet the Dead forces us to walk on this dark cobblestone road. I felt pretty nervous here, more than I'd like to admit. Exploration being the central focus of the game, I knew that I had to snoop around before going any further. I took my time reading the tombstones, the graveyard, each grave having a name and a date, but the last one over here has a giant hole underneath it. Of course I had to jump in. Only one way to find out what's in here, huh? But once I stepped in, I found myself in a dream within a dream. You Do Not Belong is this terrifying empty school. I thought the tonal shift between the previous worlds and Meet the Dead was wild, but this is straight up nightmarish. The barely lit halls, this weird sensation, like someone's right behind me, and oh man, that moment where you see that thing walking back into the darkness, absolutely terrifying. And it's not even the only time it happens. At multiple occasions throughout the level, you can catch glimpses of something or someone just a little too far from reach. The atmosphere is nerve-wracking. Though now that I've played through it, I can say I had a blast, and it was probably one of my favorite moments, but when I was in my room, in complete darkness, navigating this level, I wasn't exactly thrilled with having to find my way around. Eventually I gathered my courage and found myself in this room where the door closed behind me as soon as I collected the key. And on top of that, the chalkboard makes sure I knew I didn't belong here. I don't want to belong here. I want to go home. As you can probably tell by the footage alone, I was getting really anxious and I wanted out as soon as possible. I expected the flashlight to feel like a safety net. You know, I can finally see in the dark, but it instantly started flickering and that was enough to make me run through those halls. This dream, or nightmare, definitely reached its goal of scaring me. The cafeteria sequence, the dark creatures waiting behind the barbed wire fences, everything, and I mean everything in this world worked perfectly. No cheap jump scares, no screams, just pure tension. I absolutely loved it. I almost felt bad at the end when you're thrown back to the previous world, just because of how much fun I had. Good thing this stage is just as enjoyable. Making my way further through the level, I noticed this weird piece of paper floating in the well. I don't know if this is intentional, but it reminds me a lot of the red square from Silent Hill, and it seems that interacting with it does a similar effect. Nice little Easter egg, I appreciate it. After finding the key and entering the manor, I was greeted with this friendly ghost king who sends you on a quest to find his heart? Exploring the manor felt great. Even though a lot of the tension from the previous level had worn off, they put you right back in with this heavy thundering and all those small background noises. I went from completely relaxed back to anxious, just from hearing the grandfather clock ticking ominously. The more I walked around, the more nervous I got. There's this moment where you have to platform your way up some bookshelves, and since the ghosts around here are pretty friendly, I felt relatively safe. But as soon as I got the key, they pulled the rug from underneath my feet. The manor starts warping, doors closing behind you, portraits changing faces, an entire new segment added to the level even. By the time I got to the elevator, I just had this feeling, something bad's gonna happen. The segment leading to the retrieval of the king's heart felt very intense. What followed though was even better. I couldn't stop myself from running. I didn't want that thing who's following me to catch up. When I got back to the elevator, all I could see was its smile in the darkness. Getting the heart back to the king rewarded me with a crystal fragment, and let's just say, I was very happy to collect it. No way there'd be 3 scary levels in a row, right? Goji running away covered in blood has to be a red herring, I'm sure of it. Please? The Heavens Plaza Mall is without a shadow of a doubt my favorite dream of the entire game. They're all amazing, but this one just felt special to me. I've always loved mall levels in video games, especially when they're empty. There's something odd and eerie about them. Mall are places you'd expect to see filled to the brim with people, but no. It's just you and the sound of your feet. In here though, you're not exactly alone. In the deepest corners of the mall, you find this lost child who's locked himself in a dressing room. They send you on a small fetch quest to first get their teddy bear and then some food. Just like the last couple worlds, I started to feel like something was up. Even the smallest things like a mannequin falling over was enough to startle me. Fortunately, getting the teddy bear was pretty easy, even though the mall suddenly has giant death pits and floating platforms. Reaching the food court was also pretty smooth. The way back though, a little less. Things started changing around the mall. The fountain's water looked disgusting and the mall map is completely fenced off. There's some chunks of meat here and there, and every shop has been replaced with an ominously generic retail space sign. I hurried back to the dressing room, but I wasn't exactly ready for what awaited me. The rest of the level turns into this weird rusted version of itself. Monsters are awaiting in each store, just staring at you, sometimes even rattling the fences. Fortunately, I managed to catch up with the dream crystal fragments so I could finally return to the main hub. When I arrived though, the vibe had changed completely. The sky was red, it was raining, and the music felt as if someone reversed it. I pretty much had no choice but to continue onward. The last level is called Tower of Heaven. After leaving the sewers I was gracefully dropped in, I was met with this dark and oppressive world. Elements of each dream floating around the water, almost as if this place is where dreams end. More platforming, more cryptic dialogue from NPCs, and I slowly made my way up the tower. While every level has matching music, this one definitely conveys a feeling of urgency, especially with the textures of the tower progressively changing as you climb. You eventually meet those NPCs, almost apathetic about their current state. They're not able to go on, and there's very little you can do for them, besides the occasional cheering up. At the top, this very accurate biblical angel waits for you, as well as the last crystal fragment. The last segment of the game was oddly calming. It's a stroll through a beautiful cloudy world where you meet shapes of NPCs you've met along the way, each having charming words of departure for you. I wasn't exactly sure how much more I had left with the game, so I definitely took my time here. I wanted to savor every last bit of it. Reaching the end presents you with this ending cutscene, showing a climatic battle between our bunny friend and the nightmare creature, which turned out to be Hypno all along. So much for trying to help him out, right? I feel like this game is more about the journey, not the destination. Most exploration games don't really have endings, so having a conclusion felt pretty nice. Even though it's not necessary to enjoy the game, it felt like a really nice addition anyway. Oh, and the little teaser at the end with Goji was really cool. I hope this leads to an eventual sequel or something. Even though I probably didn't do it any favor, Hypnagogia Boundless Dreams turned out to be more than I could have wished for. What originally started as a solo dev game jam title fully bloomed into this unique and charming experience. By the end, I feel like it managed to achieve a more satisfying overall experience than many games I've played in the past. It's just that good. So yep, that's Hypnagogia Boundless Dreams, available on both Steam and itch.io. I tried my best not to compare it to other games throughout the review, but I guess the easiest way for me to praise it goes a bit like this. Hypnagogia Boundless Dreams gave me the same feeling I had when I first played Yume Nikki. The world is beautifully crafted and it made me want to get lost in it. I'll definitely have to keep a close eye on Sodaraptor's future projects because out of the 3 I've tried so far, each of them were more than excellent, even though I have a slight preference for this one. Anyway, I should probably get going before this video gets unnecessarily long. Big thanks to Sodaraptor for the amazing game, as well as to you for making it this far through the video. I'll look forward to the next journey. Until then, sweet dreams.